Good afternoon, councillors, officers, people in the public gallery and anybody watching online, and welcome to the East Gippsland Shire Council's meeting of Tuesday the 30th of April. East Gippsland Shire live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public by following the link on Council's website. During the meeting, any member of the public who is addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. If technical difficulties are experienced with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues cannot be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. East Gippsland Shire recognises and acknowledges the Gunai Kurnai, Monero and Bidwell people as the traditional owners of the land that encompass East Gippsland Shire and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional owners have cared for and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders, past, present and future. A member's attendance can only be recorded as present at a council meeting when the member can confirm that they meet all of the following criteria. Firstly, that they can hear proceedings and can be heard by other members in attendance. And secondly, that they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members. I'll now confirm with each councillor attending online in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and note assurance from each that the location they are participating from is secure to ensure that confidential deliberations remain confidential. Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Yes, indeed I can. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. And can you confirm the location you're participating from this evening is secure?
Indeed it is.
Thank you very much. Councillor White, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
And can you confirm that the location you're participating from this evening is secure?
It certainly is.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Uri, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
And can you confirm the location you are participating from is secure?
Indeed it is. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Agenda item 1.2 is apologies. CEO, I believe there are.
Thanks, Mayor. We have two apologies this evening from Councillor Arthur Allen and Councillor Kirsten Van Dievel.
Thank you, CEO. Agenda item number 1.3 is declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations of conflict of interest for tonight's meeting? That would also apply to officers. No, I see none. Very good, thank you. Agenda item 1.4 is confirmation of Council's previous meeting's minutes. Do I have a mover to confirm the minutes of the meeting held most recently? Councillor White to move, and we'll say Councillor Uri to second. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item number 1.5 is our next meeting. The next meeting of council is scheduled to occur on Tuesday the 21st of May at the Corporate Centre at 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 o'clock. Agenda item 1.7 is the open forum. And our first item is 1.7.1, which is petitions. Ms Weigel, are there any petitions?
We've received no petitions, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1.7.2 is questions of council. Are there any questions of council this evening?
No questions of council, Mayor.
Agenda item 1.7.3 is public submissions. Do we have any public submissions this evening?
We have no public submissions this evening, Mayor. Mayor, if I may just take you back to 1.6, which was requested leave for absence, and confirm that we have no request of leave of absence either.
Yes, indeed. It was there at 1.6. Thank you, CEO. Agenda item 1.8 is items for tabling, and I believe I'll take this opportunity just to recognise 3 junior Rotarians that we have with us this evening, Harper, Charlotte and from St Mary's Primary School. And I believe we have a little gift for each of you.
That's it, guys. Thank you.
And congratulations to our junior Rotarians for this evening. Agenda item number 2 is notices of motion. CEO, do we have any notices of motion this evening?
No, Mayor, we have no notices of motion.
Agenda item number 3 is deferred business.
And we have no deferred.
And we have no deferred business. Agenda item number 5 is officer reports, and our first officer report.
Mayor, may I just interrupt for a moment and just dwell on item 4, which is Council and Delegates' reports? And not that I'm going to present a report, but just to acknowledge that Anzac Day was hugely well attended, and that I know that most council, if not all councillors, did attend Anzac Day ceremonies. And this is an incredibly important and solemn day in the Australian calendar. And just to acknowledge the work of the RSL and sub-branches for organising those, and for all of those people who attended, especially dawn services. Very important.
Indeed, I know.
If I could just add, in Bairnsdale, the RSL thought they were the biggest numbers ever.
Paynesville was also very well attended at dawn and later on. And I understand as were services right across the district, so echo those thanks to everybody who participated. Thank you, Councillor Reeves, for bringing that to our attention. And of course, councillors will be submitting their reports in written format to be included in the minutes from this meeting, so they'll be publicly available on Council's website prior to our next meeting. So we'll now move to officer reports and 5.1.1, which is in the Directorate of Business Excellence, and that is the advertisement of the draft budget. Thank you, Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report presenting the draft 2024-2025 budget, and also seeking your approval to release that draft budget for community feedback. Some of the things to bear in mind in relation to this report are that the draft budget for 24-25 has been prepared in accordance with all the requirements of the Local Government Act and also the regulations, the Local Government Planning and Reporting Regulations. And they set out in quite some detail all the things that we need to comply with in drafting that budget. The draft budget proposes a rates and municipal charge increase of 2.75%, which is in line with the rate cap set by the Victorian Government for the 24-25 financial year. And I do note that it's significantly below the inflation that council is experiencing in relation to its costs. The draft budget forecasts an operating surplus for the 24-25 year of $22.75 million, noting that the underlying result, which excludes the non-recurrent capital funding from the operating deficit, is a deficit of $6.785 million. And this results mainly because of the issues associated with timing of receipt of grant funding and when that grant funding is then spent or expended. So, and it also is affected by some of the costs that occur in a cyclic way. So things that happen every few years, such as in the coming year, we'll be incurring costs associated with the council election of about $640,000. So those things have an impact, as does the bushfire funded programs, where we receive funding in previous years, but there's about another $600,000 worth of expenditure which will occur in that cycle. And so these things where there is a difference in when the money is received and when the money is spent impacts on how the matters are accounted and reported and results in that deficit. This, together with some additional staffing resources to support delivery of significant capital works programs, accounts for this result. A capital works program of $77.3 million is proposed, with $44.18 million of the program being made of projects that are carried over from the 23-24 year. There is $28.5 million of forecast capital grants that will go towards the capital program in 24-25. In accordance with Council's community engagement policy, the recommendation is that you release the draft budget and seek community feedback, and the proposed time frame for that is to release and seek feedback until the 29th of May. With me tonight is Liz Collins, our Manager of Finance, who can also help in answering any questions you might have in relation to the budget. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mr McConnell. Liz, my question relates to the notes in the report about an operating surplus of $22.750 million, yet an underlying deficit of $6.785 million. And I understand and I can read that that's been dealt with in the report, but can you just provide some reassurance to us as councillors and the community that having an underlying deficit, and we understand that over the 10-year cycle that will be reduced, but that this is not a concern for us, or how we mitigate that concern?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Reeves, for that question. Yes, the underlying result, which really is quite important in terms of council's financial sustainability, whilst removing that income that goes towards capital projects that comes and goes along the time period. In terms of the underlying deficit of just over $6 million that's forecast, there are a number of items in there that are one-off items in the current year, 24-25, I should say, budget proposed, that will not reoccur in out years. And as Mr McConnell identified, there's one is the timing of Roads to Recovery capital grant funding, which remains in the calculation because it's recurrent. And that goes up and down over the whole 4 years of this budget and the 10 years of the 10-year financial plan. The amount in the 24-25 year is less than the average, so that's one of the reasons. And other years it goes up and drops down again, depending on the capital projects that are allocated to use that funding. There's also the one-off cost for the council election, as we said, some additional resources that drop off over the next couple of years. They're there to support the delivery of the capital program and also some programs that were funded in prior years that will be completed in 24-25. So whilst it is, we aim for a surplus, an underlying surplus, the reasons for the deficit are accounted for. As we go out for the other remaining years, it does go up and down with a couple of years when you look at the 10-year financial plan later on. It does go into an underlying deficit for a couple of years, but there are explanations for that. Once again, it's the timing of cyclic maintenance for the Raymond Island Ferry every second year, $850,000. There's also the election cost over $400,000 every 4 years. And there's also the variation in the average amount for the Roads to Recovery grant. It moves up and down, as I said, over the years. So if we go to those remaining 9 years, which you'll see in the financial plan, we have an average surplus of just over $360,000 for those out 9 years. So that hopefully gives councillors comfort, because that's where we're aiming to have an underlying surplus on average across the years.
Thank you very much. Liz, Councillor Stowe.
Liz, could I just ask you to comment on our debt levels as a Shire, the interest rates that we pay on those debt levels, and also the terms of our loans?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Stowe, for that question. Council has relatively low debt levels, and we have an older loan that in the next few years will be fully paid out, and that was for the Tambo Bluff Special Charge Scheme. And whilst that's at an older, higher interest rate, that's being funded by the Special Charge Scheme that's in place for that. We have two community low interest loans through Treasury, one for the Eagle Point Hub and one for the World Sporting Precinct. And the Eagle Point Hub has been turned into I'll call it a normal loan. Until the loan is fully drawn down, we're charged at 11 AM interest rates. And then when it's drawn down, we get the discount. And with the discount, it will vary depending on the interest rates each month, but currently it's sitting at about 3% with the discount, which is over 1% that we're getting discount. The World loan is yet to be fully drawn down, and then once again, it'll be whatever the prevailing interest rate is, less a discount from Treasury. So we are getting interest rates that are below what the normal commercial market rate would be for those loans through the community low interest loan scheme. Okay.
Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor White, and then Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. My question relates to the money that's still left in the Bushfire Recovery Fund. It's still quite a lot of money, and I'm just interested in what it may be used for, how it'll be distributed, and how long will it take to get that out to where it can do the most good.
Thanks, Councillor White. As you're aware, we're currently preparing a briefing for you on this very matter. So we'll go into the details as part of that. But most of the fund sources that we have related to bushfire recovery run through to about mid-2025. So we've got about the 15 months or so worth to run on those, and there is programs of work set out for expenditure for most of the vast majority of that money. There is a little bit of it that we're still finalising arrangements for, but it goes to not just the programs that we're delivering or being delivered in communities through both council and through other agencies, but it also goes to the funding of council staff to do some of that work for the recovery programs. Some of those programs, some of the grants are also being used to fund key community projects like the redevelopment of the Buchan Rec Reserve.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell.
Thank you.
Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you. My question relates to consultant fees, because this is an area that's often of interest to people in the community, I think, when they look at our budget or they look at council's work. And I note, so this is on page 50 of the budget papers, and I note that there is predicted quite a decrease in the amount allocated to consultants' fees. And I wondered if I could perhaps have some commentary about that, whether it relates to our capital expenditure program or our staff capacity or whatever.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Uri, for that question. Yes, there is a significant decrease in the consultancy expenditure, and it is for operating programs and projects, so none of that is for capital programs. The use of consultancies has been reviewed across a number of programs to see what capacity certain teams and business units may have to do some of the work in-house with expertise that we now may have in-house and may not have had, prior to that this particular year. There are also some consultancies that would have been funded by grant programs as well, but there are other ones, such as when we do our planning scheme reviews, for example, we will continue to use, consultancies and that expertise through that process for some of those technical reviews that we undertake. So there's a couple of reasons for that reduction, but certainly being able to do more in-house has certainly saved us some money on those consultancies.
Terrific. Thank you, Liz.
Councillor, is there any further questions of officers?
Thanks, Mayor. May I ask a question?
You may indeed.
Thank you. So, to the officers, we're being asked to move or to resolve to release this draft plan to the public. So we're not actually moving the budget at this stage. So I just think, is it important that the public and the hundreds of people who are watching understand the process from here? And I know that it is in the notes, but around reading this in relation to the council plan, 10-year financial plan, 4-year revenue and rating plan. But how does the community get to know this, and how do they give the feedback, and when and where can they do that?
Thank you, Councillor Reid. It's a good question. Mr. McConnell.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So there's a range of things, firstly, that we're doing through a range of different media and other communications channels to let people know that the draft budget is available for comment. It's a really good opportunity for people to comment on the draft budget. Whether in providing feedback, it might be something that we can incorporate in this budget, but it also might be something that takes some more work and then we need to reflect and think about for future budgets. But all of that feedback is really useful, and particularly around some of those things about where we've sought to strike a balance between different factors. Have we got that balance right? And getting community feedback around that is really, really important. So the comment period will be open until the 29th of May. People can provide, all the information will be available through Council's website, but in particular, there is a Your Say page that's been set up that houses that will house all the relevant documents, and we'll also have a survey or a questionnaire to help people in providing feedback. But if providing feedback online in that way is not your thing, you can simply write to the CEO also, as long as that comes in that period, and provide your feedback in the budget in that way. So there's multiple opportunities for people to provide feedback. I think from that point then, officers will assemble that information and then step through that with councillors to see what of that feedback is appropriate for consideration within the finalising the budget and present to a draft final budget for councillors' consideration on the 25th of June. So it's a reasonably tight process. One thing I would note is that we do respond to each of the submissions that's been received, and so hopefully people will be able to see then some transparency about how we've taken on board any feedback provided, and then how that's been considered.
Great. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you for the question. Councillors, are there any further questions? No, I see none, in which case we do have an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Happy to move. Councillor Reeves,
Yep,
thank
happy
you.
to move it,
And
Mayor.
Seconder, Councillor Buckley,
Thanks,
thank
Councillor
you.
Buckley.
Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak?
I would be very happy
to the motion?
to speak to
Thank
this,
you.
and as noted, that what we're actually doing is releasing this for feedback, so getting this out to the community. Councillors, this has been framed to ensure the organisation, the Shire, is adequately resourced to deliver the work, services and initiatives set out in our council plan. We're aware of the challenges that we have and continuing to impact our community, there's no doubt about that. But we're continually looking at ways to improve our efficiency and deliver the services to the community to ensure we remain financially sustainable. It's been built on a strong focus of managing within our means, and to that end, our rate cap has been set at 2.75%, and the draft budget is in line with that. And what should be realised and noted is that that is the total rate take, 2.75% increase. So individual household rate notices may vary. The budget process that differential rates for the farm class of properties be set at 75% of the general rate. This is an increase in the discount provided of 5% over last year. And for commercial industrial class of properties, it's proposed to be set at 135, which is a reduction from 140% last year. There'll be variations in individual rate assessments as a result of the valuations taken by the Victorian Valuer General. And these are average increases that I've mentioned above. While we are cautious of the cost escalations, councillors, I certainly believe that small incremental increases are much less impactful than large delayed increases. So we need to keep up with the creeping CPI increases. User fees and charges are generally set to increase by 3.5%, but we have managed to maintain that green waste disposal fee at $12 per cubic metre. As has been mentioned, there's a significant capital works program of $77 or so million, and that government funding of nearly 29 or 28.5 million towards capital projects is expected. And this is important to continue the investment in facilities in our Shire. And there's a whole list of those budgeted capital works projects in the budget at section 4.55. So, councillors, as mentioned by the officers, we're seeking feedback by Wednesday the 29th of May. There's a range of means that our community can get hold of the budget, and a range of means that they can provide that feedback. And as a result of that, councillors, I certainly endorse this and urge you to support its release to the public for feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes,
go
thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers for their recommendation to Council that presents the draft budget for consideration to the community and outlining a plan for community feedback. While the recommendation serves as a procedural step, it also underscores the critical importance of public review in shaping fiscal policy. I'm grateful that the Council's wishes have been enacted to ensure that there is time for community input. The draft's budget exposure for public review is a fundamental aspect of democratic governance. It allows for transparency and accountability, enabling community members to scrutinise proposed expenditures and provide valuable feedback. By engaging citizens in the budgetary process, local government fosters a sense of ownership and ensures that the budget aligns with the needs and priorities of its ratepayers, and moreover, public input enhances the quality of decision-making, enriching the budget with diverse perspectives and insights. However, Despite the commendable effort to solicit community feedback, the draft budget must address the pressing financial constraints confronting the community. In the current climate of economic uncertainty and hardship, it is incumbent upon the Council to exercise prudence and restraint in fiscal matters, and the proposed budget may lack the necessary austerity measures. I do acknowledge, though, that the savings in consultant fees and management of caravan parks has been identified, and this is an important step. Yet tightening the belt a few more notches may be required to navigate these challenging times effectively. Although there's been an overall decrease, the allocation of differential rates, particularly the discrepancy between the farming and commercial sectors, raises concerns about equity and fairness. The differential rating system, in my view, imposes a disproportionate burden on the farming sector while favouring commercial interests. Such disparity undermines the principle of equity and may exacerbate financial strain on already stressed and vulnerable segment of the community. So to address these issues, it's imperative for Council to engage with community, re its budgetary priorities, and ensure that resources are allocated well to maximise public welfare. This may entail revisiting expenditure allocations, identifying areas for cost-saving measures, and exploring alternative revenue sources to alleviate the burden on ratepayers, particularly farmers and the residential ratepayers. So in conclusion, while the Office's recommendation to advertise the draft budget for public review is a positive step towards transparency and community engagement, it's essential to acknowledge within the proposed budget that us being stewards of the public funds, that Council must strive to strike a balance between fiscal responsibility and social equity, particularly in times in financial hardship. By heeding community feedback and reassuring budget priorities, the Council can best serve the interests of its people and promote the collective wellbeing of the community. So I will support the draft going out to community and hope that the feedback will guide councillors and the organisation to make any necessary changes that are deemed necessary. Thank you, councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Buckley, I'm guessing that's a legacy hand of yours. And Councillor White,
Yeah.
Are you seeking to speak for or against the motion, or are you opposing the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I've actually, I'm not sure whether I've put my hand up at the right time. I actually am in favour of the motion, but I'm not in favour of some of the things in the budget.
Okay.
So,
certainly, the motion before us is about releasing the budget for comment to the public, rather than the specific content. If you'd like to speak for or against the motion, I'm happy to afford you the opportunity to do that now.
All right, thank you. Councillor Buckley's actually said many of the things that I've got here in my notes, but it's sort of disappointing that we couldn't have done more to restrict the increases to the community. We may have to, run a business, but so are so many other people in our community. We have our pensioners and our retirees who probably adjust their budget almost on a weekly basis now in order to make ends meet. The small businesses are struggling, and the farmers are certainly taking, having it really tough. And I'm just disappointed that, some of the talk around the table was about why can't we get rid of rate capping because we need more money. It's just not the right attitude when we're in these uncertain and tough times, and we are here to represent the community, not to take more of them. So that's my
Sorry, point of order, Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Rees, what's your point?
I don't know that speaking about what's been discussed around the table is appropriate at this particular point.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to support your view there, Councillor Rees. John, if you wouldn't mind speaking to the motion, which is or against the motion, which is to release the budget for public consultation, that'd be great. I'm a little unclear whether you're speaking for or against, so if you wouldn't mind stating that'd be great for clarity.
I am certainly for releasing this draft budget to the public, and I would encourage as many people as possible to actually read this document and give some feedback, because I'm hoping that the feedback, when it comes in, that maybe we can look a little bit, perhaps put the microscope back onto the budget, and if the responses are favourable, we could make some adjustments before the final budget goes out for next year. So I would just encourage everybody, at least this year, there's getting to be a better amount of time for people to view the budget, and there are some very learned people out there who will pick up on this and probably send back some great advice. So I will support it, because we need to get it out to the public.
Thank you, John. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly speak in support of the recommendation to release the budget for comment, and like other councillors around the table, would really encourage people to take note of the budget and read as much of it as possible. It's a bit of a daunting task to read all the budget papers, I think, but at least if those first 12 or 13 pages in the introductory part of the draft budget are read, that gives a great explanation, I think, into the different aspects and the different things that need to be weighed up for council to get to this stage in the budget process. And I just wanted to say thank you to the staff for getting to this. This is such a long and detailed process that starts before Christmas, before the end of the previous year. And we've had, I don't know how many workshops we've had, but lots of workshops to discuss the various aspects. And I thank the councillors for all their deliberations in this as well. Obviously, there are loads of things to weigh up, including how the community is faring themselves and the different aspects of the community, but also the services that we want to provide and how much it costs to deliver those. So it's a tricky balance always. I feel that we've got it reasonably right, but I'm really happy to get feedback from the community and to consider that as we take the next step in the budget process. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Greeson.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I support the motion, and I think it's really important to put this document out to the community for feedback. I think it's really well written, and so I really congratulate the staff for that. I think it's great, and it's a very good budget. But I do want to comment on the differential rates in the draft papers that are going out for consultation, and know that we have more time for consideration of this before we pass the budget in June. And just to explain for our three youngsters out there about rates, I'm sure you'll be fascinated. Rates are going to increase by 2.75% this year. And within this, we can adjust categories up and down depending on who needs greater support. We already subsidise the farm sector by 20%, and this is essentially paid for by residential landowners and the commercial sector. Commercial is rated at 140%, while farm sector is rated at 80%. Now, this year, the Valuer General valued all the properties as usual, and in 2024, there was a bit of a decrease for residential and an increase for commercial and a bigger increase for farm. So using the way we did the differentials last year, this would mean that residential rates would increase by 1.79%, commercial at 140% by 4.49%, and farm at 80% by 8.59%. So the differentials proposed in this budget are aiming to level the percentage between the three categories. And I raise the question, is this fair? We've been advised that property owners in East Gippsland classified as being in hardship are all residential. We've been advised that the number of payment plans in East Gippsland have doubled the last year to about 600, and all but 2 are residential. We know that commercial and farm owners can claim the rates back on tax. Residential landowners cannot, unless they're renting their property out. And we know a lot more people are seeking food bank assistance, including many people who are employed and therefore may well be landowners. I was advised today that it's estimated that over 500 people in East Gippsland are seeking food assistance every week. So is it right to ask residential landowners to further subsidise farms and commercial sectors? Excuse me. So the proposed scenario of commercial 135% and farm 75% would have the impact of increasing residential rates by 2.75%. This is an additional burden for residential landowners to support in order to support commercial and farm owners who are able to claim back their rates. So I'm hoping that through the community consultation, there will be some great thinking and great ideas to come back into us to think through this more. We've thought it through, we've looked at different scenarios, we've pondered over better ways of doing this. I think there are better ways of doing this than the proposed one, but I might be wrong. But I'm really keen to have feedback. Saying that, I really commend these papers to you to look at and understand. There's really good, clear explanations at the beginning. You don't even really need to go into the thousands of figures that are there to understand what's been happening within council budget. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? I see no one. In that case, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous, CEO. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.1.2, which is to advertise the 10-year financial plan and the 4-year revenue and rating plan, which also sits within the Directorate of Business Excellence. Mr McConnell.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report on the presenting the 10-year financial plan for 24-25 through to 2033-34, and the 4-year revenue and rating plan from 24-25 through to 27-28, and seeking your approval to release these updated plans for community feedback. And these are two key financial planning documents that really are the complement to the budget. So the budget is presenting a view which is focusing mostly on the next 12-month period. The revenue and rating plan obviously setting out how the rates are to be struck and the rationale for that, and the 10-year financial plan giving us that long view about how council's finances are tracking over the longer term, which is really important in terms of planning. The Local Government Act requires council to adopt a 10-year financial plan. The first plan was adopted for the 21-22 to 2030-31 period, and that's been updated each time as part of the annual budget process. And again, the 10-year plan has been updated as part of this budget process. Really what we're focused on in that is to ensure that the resources are available to give effect to the council plan. So the council plan sets out what's important for council to deliver for our community, and the budget is aligned to deliver on that and on the other strategic plans that council has adopted. The plan provides the information about the decisions and assumptions that underpin forecasts about our financial resources, and which is really important. It includes all that information about our expectation in terms of inflation and other key factors affecting our long-term planning. The plan's a key planning document and supports our sustainability into the future, which is critical if we're to continue to support the East Gippsland community. The Local Government Act also requires council to prepare and adopt a revenue and rating plan for at least the next 4 financial years. And so the revenue and rating plan draft that's presented has been reviewed and updated for the next period, for 24-25 through to 27-28, and it includes that information around rating legislation and the principles, together with information on council's current rating strategy, including the differentials that are used, the service charges and other forms of revenue. And so in that way, the two documents work together and support the budget that you've just considered. And again, Liz Collins, Manager Finance, is also available with me tonight to help in answering any questions. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor White.
Thank you. My question relates to when the review is closes, which is the 20. Yeah, at the end of it's May 29. So, is that coming to the next council meeting after that closes, Stuart? And if so, if there's some feedback that's really vital to that report, how could you possibly have time to make adjustments?
Thanks, Councillor White. So you're right, the comment period extends through till the 29th of May. And at that point, officers will work through the feedback that's been provided and work that through with councillors to identify any responses or changes that are required to the budget in readiness to present then a draft final budget for your consideration on the 25th of June. So we've got just under a month between the closing of the comment period and then consideration by council. So it is a tight period. Where there are particular issues that come up between now and the 29th of May, we won't wait until the 29th of May to consider those. So as information comes in, we can consider that and do the work to consider is that something that we would like to see incorporated in the budget or not, or indeed whether it's something that requires further work. And I would flag that often through the budget process, people will flag maybe, for example, infrastructure that's important for the future of a particular community. And that's something that we then might take on board and do further work on in the future before bringing back as part of future budgets. So we may not be able to take all of those suggestions into account in this budget, but the feedback is not lost. But you're right, Councillor White, it will be a tight period to step through the feedback. And so again, if there's critical issues that people have before then please raise them so that we have time to work that through and present the best budget we can for you on the 25th.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. So therefore, if something you didn't have time to introduce or amend something, there will be another repeat of this next budget time that it could be brought forward for the next 4 years out and the next 10 years.
Thanks, Councillor White. That's right. So information that comes in that where the time frame doesn't allow us to consider it within this budget cycle, again, what we can do is, where appropriate, factor that into our future planning. It might be design programs in capital works or other things to consider what's needed in the future and then factor that in. So you're right, we have that opportunity to consider some matters in the future as well.
Very good. Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? There is a recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Sure. Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Mayor. The vacuum, I'll fill the vacuum this time round. So happy to move it.
A seconder for the officer recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the
Thank you
motion?
once again. This is an important document, and thanks to the officers for the work that's been provided to the community. Please have a look at it. Please seek information and advice if you need it. Use the MySay page and get information and get that information back to us and drill into it. Some of it is quite complex, and I'm just looking at some, for example, the policy statements and policy assumptions. When they're spread out over the 10 years, they actually can't include some of the potential grants in future. So I think that's important to note when I drill into this, and I hope that some of the community members do the same and drill into it and have a look at it. But I certainly endorse this and encourage councillors to do so, which is to get it out to the community and get that feedback in the first instance.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I don't have much to add to this. It's very much part of the budget paper we've just discussed earlier. It's a 10-year financial plan and draft 4-year revenue and rating plan. Again, you know, as Councillor Reeves said, it's just really important that people who are interested take the opportunity to have a look and feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous, CEO. Thank you, councillors. At our Rotarians, it is lovely to have you here, but don't feel that you do need to stay for the entire meeting. It is entirely up to you. Our next agenda item is 5.1.3, which is a finance report for the period ended 31st of March 2024. And Mr McConnell, General Manager for Business Excellence, this also sits in your directorate. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor, and I promise this is the last finance report for this evening. Councillors, before you is the report, the finance report, the quarterly finance report for the period ended 31st of March 2024, and it seeks your adoption of that report for the first 9 months of the year. Some of the key points in that, as you're aware, the Local Government Act requires us to prepare a quarterly budget report and to present that to Council detailing financial performance to date. The key point in this is that the forecast operating result so far is a deficit of $12.4 million compared with the operating budget surplus, the adopted budget operating surplus of $43 million. The key thing, the reason for this change again relates principally to the timing of receipt of funds. So the forecast reduction in the operating surplus is primarily a result of $15 million of expenditure added to the forecast primarily due to projects that were grant funded, where the grant funds were recognised last year but were incomplete at the end of the 2022-23 year, and so the expenditure occurs in this year and the revenue was recognised last year. There is also forecast reduction in the capital grant income in the year of $16.6 million as a result of some of the capital projects now being planned for completion next year in the 24-25 financial year. There is also a reduction in operating grants of $18.7 million as a result of the advance payment of that money, $19.6 million in fact, of the Victorian Grants Commission funds for 23-24. So that was prepaid and so was recognised in the 22-23 year. Council's end of year cash position is forecast to be $41 million greater than the operating budget, with the most significant variance being for cash being held for capital projects that was, as I said, budgeted to be spent in this current year, but will now be spent in the 24-25 year as a result of some of the projects being incomplete at the end of the year. So that's the key things for you in relation to this finance report. With me tonight is Liz Collins, who can assist with any questions of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor White.
Thank you, Mayor. Stuart, there's a $10.25 million proceeds from sale of investments. Would Liz be able to perhaps put some more detail in that, please? Because it's quite a lot of money and there's very little detail in the column as to what it was about. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor White, for that question. And this is one of those, accounting questions, if you like. At the end of each financial year, if we have funds invested and they're invested for a period greater than 90 days, then they have to be classified as other financial assets, and they fall into this other group of investments, as opposed to cash and investments at year end, which are held and said to be all the same. So in this particular instance in the budget, we'd forecast $35 million would be held for those investments that were greater than 90 days at year end. And in actual fact, we had invested $45 million in those longer term investments. So it's really just that move from they don't get included in the cash and investments, they have their own line. And when we redeemed those investments, so there was $10 million that fell into that category of cash flow, additional cash, and it was in there rather than in the cash at year end, which all the other investments were. I hope that makes sense because it's really the accounting treatment of how we had to treat those longer term investments. So it is a little bit confusing, I realise that, but it wasn't windfall cash, it was still part of our cash and investments, if you like, at year end.
Okay, thanks, Liz. So would I be right in saying that the word sale of investments is perhaps a little bit confusing, that we haven't sold anything?
Once again, we have to use the standard terminology that's required in those reports, and they refer to them as sale of investments because when we cash them in, we sell them back, if you like. So, yes, even though it's a redemption of the investments, so it is a little bit confusing. So maybe I can add some more clarity when I do notes next time if that happens, just to assist the readers.
No, thanks, Liz. Good answer.
Thank you, Liz. Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? In which case there is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Uri, thank you. The mover and a seconder. Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, just to thank officers for another detailed report. Thank you. I don't think I need to comment further. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Uri. Councillor Stowe.
Very complex, isn't it? Look, I think we can be confident that our accounts are being well looked after and we're being provided with the correct reports, and all the questions that we have asked over the last few weeks have been answered, so have no hesitation in seconding the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.1.4, which is council policies. And our first one there is 5.1.4.1, which is our draft privacy policy, which falls under business excellence. Still, Mr McConnell, it's been your night so far.
Still going. So thank you, Mayor. Councillors.
Thank you, Liz.
Before you use a report about a range of council policies, but principally the most critical one I draw your attention to is the privacy policy, which is presented for your consideration. The report also recommends that council rescind a number of policies that are no longer required, and I'll go to the context for why that's the case. To comply with obligations under the Local Government Act and to maintain trust and confidence from community, it's critical that council demonstrates good standards of governance, integrity and its ethical behaviour and conduct, and the policies set out those requirements for decision making and also in relation to the provision of our services. In relation to the privacy matters, council is required to comply with the Privacy and Data Protection Act and with the information privacy principles which promote and ensure the fair and responsible collection of use and management of personal and health information. The existing information privacy policy and guidelines were due to be reviewed in April 2021, and a new policy has been developed to replace these two documents, and that's presented as attachment 1. In addition, a review of our corporate documents register has identified a number of council policies that are no longer required to be maintained, as they are no longer necessary or have been replaced by other policies. And accordingly, the report seeks to rescind the following documents which were previously adopted by council. So the information privacy policy and the information privacy guidelines I've mentioned, they're in a sense superseded by the policy that's in front of you for consideration. There are a number of policies that have that were council policies but are more appropriately considered as operational policies and have been replaced by operational policies. So the service provision and fire danger ratings policy, access to information policy, the after hours on call, call out policy, and the drone policy. So there are other policies now in place governing those matters. And the last one I'll just draw your attention to is the timber encouragement policy, which came from a period in which we were seeking to encourage the use of local timber in council projects, and clearly the context for that has changed now. So for that reason, the policy is listed for rescission. So with me tonight, if you have any further questions of detail, is Al Breling, Manager of Governance, and we can respond to any questions you have. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, my question is around the information being able to be shared with other government departments, etc., if they meet the requirements or, circumstances. Can you please explain to me how that's not an invasion of personal and, sharing of private data?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, through you, Chair. Those circumstances, Councillor Buckley, would only be for the reasons where there may be a criminal investigation underway, for example, where the information would be required under another relevant and appropriate act, and it would need to be sought. The information request would go to the CEO before any information was released.
May I just ask, wouldn't that normally be a process of, the courts to be able to procure or subpoena information?
That's another mechanism as well, Councillor Buckley. Thank you.
So at whose discretion is this done under, and what provision is there to protect personal information?
So I think the acts under which the information can be sought are outlined in the policy. So it would be, if it's a court instruction, we would be acting on that, for example, a subpoena. There may also be a request from, let's say, for example, Victoria Police for some information to feed into an investigation that they may have underway, and that request would go to the CEO for consideration.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
If I might, Councillor Buckley, I think it's I should have noted in the introduction possibly that the arrangements that that you've raised, the policy really reflects what's already set out in legislation in terms of what can and can't be released and the circumstances for its release. So that's already set out in legislation, and what the policy is doing is helping to set out how we administer that, for example, through the CEO sign-off of the release of any information.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? No, in which case there is an officer recommendation in the report. Councillor Stowe, followed by Councillor Greason as a seconder. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Like it's largely procedural. We're tidying up our procedures to provide good governance, so have no hesitation in moving the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Look, I feel strongly that privacy and confidentiality and the protection of people's personal and health information is a fundamental right and needs to be taken very seriously. So I went through this draft policy line by line, and so I'm supportive of the outcome. I think it's a good document. I think it will protect people's personal and health information adequately and according to the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri.
Yes, thank you. I speak in support of the motion also, and in particular note that one of the concerns of mine was how long the information would be retained for by council, because I think there's always sort of an end date. I see that there is a clause in there on page 251 of our notes. It's under data security, and it's principle 4, which to my mind deals with that issue satisfactorily. So happy to support the recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that appears to be unanimous, CEO. Thank you, councillors. Takes us on to agenda item 5.1.5, which is the election period policy, which also sits with Mr McConnell. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. So, councillors, before you is a report presenting the revised election period policy for your consideration. To comply with our obligations under the Local Government Act, Council needs to have a election period policy as part of its governance rules, and the policy was last adopted in August 2020 in preparation for the 2020 elections. And so it's appropriate that it's updated similarly ahead of the upcoming council elections. The purpose of the election period policy is to avoid actions and decisions which could be seen as influencing voters or for which have significant impact on the incoming council. And the purpose of the policy is to provide guidance to councillors, council officers and candidates in the lead up to the local government elections, known as the election period. And it also provides a framework for decisions which are prohibited by the council during that election period. The extensive refinements to the policy and the key changes have been listed under the summary of changes. I do note quite a number of the changes are administrative in nature, but it's part of ensuring the report is clear in its intent. So tonight, again, with me is Albert Elling, Manager Governance, who can assist us with any questions of detail that councillors may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions on the council election period policy? Councillor Greason.
I was just wondering, Stuart, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the sorts of things that people who are interested in standing for election, particularly if they're council staff or existing councillors, will need to be aware of.
Thanks, Councillor Gresham. I suppose one of the principles is that whether it be council staff or councillors in standing for election, is that they can't use their position and their resources that might be available to them during the election period for campaigning purposes or for campaigning purposes generally. And so there are certain provisions, some that apply to staff, for example, the requirement for staff who may wish to stand for council to take leave during that period so that they are not using council resources, etc., for that purpose. And similarly, there are expectations on councillors that, again, the position and the opportunities that are provided to councillors and the resources such as laptops or vehicles or similar are not used for campaign purposes. And so there's some of the things that the election period policy sets out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillors, are there any further questions? Election period policy? No, I see none. There is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that motion, please? Councillor Greason, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Uri. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, just to say that this is essential and it's quite complex and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, I think it's great to have this document revised at this particular time because, it is critical information for anybody wanting to stand. So the fact that it's freshly been looked at freshly, and it's all up to date, is should stand us in good stead. Any candidate who is wanting to stand, I hope they read this and are clear about their obligations and duties. Thank you, Mayor. Thank
you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That moves us to agenda item 5.1.6, which is the council meeting resolution register, which I believe is also with you, Mr. McConnell.
Thanks, Mayor. So, councillors, before you is the council meeting resolution register, and it's presented for your information, and you're invited to note that register. Presentation of the register is an important part of our performance and transparency, because it provides that information about what's happened in response to the decisions that are made around the table in council meetings. So it's part of the transparency and part of our accountability to the community. Council's CEO is responsible for ensuring that the decisions of council are implemented without undue delay. And so for the period 1st of January through to the 31st of March 2024, there were 16 resolutions made in the open council meeting, of which 15 have been completed, and 1 is in progress. And that doesn't include resolutions which were to note and didn't require action. There was 1 resolution in a closed council meeting, in a confidential meeting, and that has been completed also. The report also provides an update of outstanding actions from previous periods, so that's provided for your information also. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? No, I see none. There is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Reeves, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
Happy to have this on the record, and for transparency, to see what's been enacted as a result of council's decisions.
Indeed.
No, thank you.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That is carried unanimously. Agenda item 5.1.7 is amendments to the contents of the East Gippsland Shire's meeting minutes. And I believe this is your last item for this evening, Mr. McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, before you is a report which addresses a resolution made by council regarding the revisions to the governance rules, which are intended to be in line with the recommendations that have arisen from the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission Operation Sandon Special Report. The resolution specifically sought changes related to the recording of councillors' participation and voting behaviour in council meetings. So some of the key points for your consideration. The report provides context on councillors' previous resolution to seek revisions of the governance rules in response to the recommendations from the IBAC Operation Sandon report. And it outlines the specific changes sought regarding the recording of councillors' participation and voting behaviour. The report highlights the recommendations from the Sandon report, which aim to address corruption risks and strengthen governance practices. And these recommendations include promoting transparency in planning decisions, enhancing regulation of donations and lobbying, and strengthening council governance. The report details the Chief Executive Officer's implementation of an administrative change already to record councillors' votes on agenda items in council meeting minutes. This action serves as a temporary solution while awaiting the proposed legislative amendments, and aims to streamline the revision process and minimise disruption to council operations. So it's important to note that this area of governance rules for councillors is subject to significant reform and interest at a state government level at the moment. So there are things being worked through in that space. And the report concludes with a recommendation for council to receive and note the report, but also to acknowledge the implementation of the administrative change that has occurred, and to acknowledge that future revisions of council's governance rules will be informed by the model rules and the legislative reforms that are underway at the state level, and particularly noting the update of governance rules being something that's properly considered by the incoming council after the upcoming elections. So, councillors, before you use the report, and again, Albert Elling is with me to assist with any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Greeson and Councillor Buckley.
This is a little question I didn't give advance notice of, but I'm a little bit confused. The monitors have provided their final report saying council does not undertake a review of governance rules prior to the 2024 local government elections, blah, blah. But in effect, have we done that? Has the CEO actually made changes already that require that?
Yeah. So thank you, Councillor Grecian. So updating governance rules is quite a formal process, and the piece that you refer to in a monitor's report, we're referencing work done by a monitor that was looking at the actions in another council, and the advice there was to hold off updating the governance rules until two things: the reforms that are being worked through at the state government level, and also allowing the new council to consider those matters. So we've taken that on as sound advice to inform what we do. I think but what we've done in the meantime is, rather than to get some of the benefit without necessarily going through that very formal process of updating the governance rules, we've made an administrative change that goes at least some of the way towards addressing the matters that were raised in the notice of motion, and that is to make sure that the specific voting of individual councillors is recorded in the minutes. So that's an administrative change rather than a change to the governance rules.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Greeson. Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yeah, look, thank you. Well, firstly, the administrative change to ensuring that councillors' votes are automatically recorded in any divisions is a fairly standard operation across many councils, is it not? And so we're just sort of falling into line what already exists amongst many councils.
Just to clarify, Councillor Buckley, this goes beyond recording the names for a division to recording the names of how councillors voted at every decision, I believe.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that clarification. So that was my first question. It is a fairly routine type of administrative change. As far as I'm aware, many councils already have done this for quite some time. We don't know.
So, Councillor Bunkley, I think it's fair to say it's a reflection of good practice that was reflected there in the advice from the Operation Sandon report.
And secondly, was there enough? Perhaps this is my personal view, enhancing my question or the purpose of the question. But do you believe that there was enough consultation with local government councils in regards to the proposals that are being put forward by the Sanderson report and also the Minister for Local Government?
Thanks.
Has there been enough consultation and time to respond and engage?
Sorry, I'm not really sure whether that's relevant to the matter that we're considering. This is to do with the adoption of an administrative change to our own minutes rather than our governance rules. Alba, would you like to comment on that?
I think through you, Chair, Councillor Buckley, I think that might be a question we can answer separately, as I don't think it's relevant for this particular topic. It's rather looking into the review of the legislation more broadly. As the Chair pointed out, this is to note the administrative changes that have already been made for the recording of the minutes for council meetings on behalf by the CEO.
Thank you. I will address that particular issue when it is time appropriate. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, are there any other questions of officers? No, in which case we do have an officer recommendation. Councillor Reeve, it was your original motion. Happy to see you move that. Councillor Greason, second. Councillor Reeve, would you like to speak to the
I
motion?
just want to acknowledge the rapid implementation of this change, and it's great for transparency. And I think what Councillor Buckley refers to, I think, is a matter that perhaps Council or MAV can take up in future with the state government.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Greason?
I have nothing to add, thank you.
Very good. Is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to our Assets and Environment Directorate. Sorry, Councillor White, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just to go back to Councillor Reeves' point of order, he was clearly out of line, and sadly you ran with him on this, but the document that I was describing was in the last council meeting and out to the public, and that was that this group, not the majority of this group, actually have an ask of the government to remove the rate capping. And using this new system, you're clearly that Councillor Buckley and myself voted against or spoke against that part. So,
okay, John, look, I'm happy for you to have made that point. I don't think it's relevant to where we're at in the council meeting agenda right now. So maybe if you'd like to contact me after the meeting, I'm happy to hear what you've got to say on that, and we can act on it if and as required. But right now we're at agenda item 5.2, which is Assets and Environment, and we're at 5.2.1, which is Capital Works and Major Projects Q3 2024, and this sits in the Directorate of Assets and Environment, and we have with us Mr. Wayne Richards and several other subject matter experts. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Mayor, and sorry, Stuart. So, councillors, before you is the Capital Works and Major Projects report for Q3 2023-24. At the end of the third quarter, I'm pleased to report expenditure plus commitments total $69.9 million, and we now have 265 projects under management. During the quarter, the capital budget has been revised down by $27.7 million to $67.7 million. This was primarily due to additional carry-forwards identified through the quarter. Carry-forwards for 23-24 are now projected at $50.4 million. A detailed list is provided at attachment 5. Other key points within the report, a total net balance of $510,000 was transferred from capital projects to operating budgets. The balance of the holding account as at 31st of March is $413,000, and 3 contracts were awarded under delegation during the third quarter. So as a recommendation before you, I have Renee Wicks, Manager Infrastructure Projects, and Zoe Delaney, Project Management Office Coordinator, to answer any technical questions.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Councillors, are there any questions of a technical nature or otherwise on this agenda item? Councillor Uri.
I'm having trouble finding my hand, so thank you for sitting with me. My question relates, please, fairly specifically to the change of scope of the Bairnsdale composting facility. So this is spoken about on page 314 of our notes. I'm not sure whether the grant application was unsuccessful or the rescoping came first and then the grant application was reduced, but I just wondered if I could have a bit of a better understanding of that, please. And apologies to the staff because I missed a briefing on this perhaps last week when you might have covered it. But I think there's a general interest in the community with this project, so I'd really like to understand it a little bit more, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. So with this particular project, it's the scope of the design project that's been amended through this grant program and reduction of grant. So this will not affect the timelines or the scope of the final composting facility or its effectiveness on completion. Thank you.
Okay, that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, are there any other questions for officers? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This was covered in our briefing, but I suppose I just would like it to become a little bit more in the public understanding. There has been some areas that have been put on hold within the Capital Works program. So perhaps you could just explain a little bit about the on hold projects and why that's the case.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley. I guess, is there any particular projects, because there's a number of projects that that do get placed on hold for various reasons?
Yeah, okay. So there's the dragway demolition.
So with the dragway, at the moment the dragway and the site is still under a lease agreement. So officers have been working with the users of that facility to allow them to use the facility up until the completion of that lease agreement, but noting that there is an impact on future development of the aerodrome airport site. So yeah, the project is on hold, but there will need to be progress on that once the lease agreement's completed.
And is there also any movement in regards to finding a relocation area for the dragway for our wonderful car enthusiasts?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Buckley. Officers are working and in communication with the user groups. I guess I can say there's been limited success with those sites, but I can get back to you with more information on that one.
Thank you very much. And just finally, is there anything that has been identified as of concern in regards to the capital works that could be highlighted for the public to understand?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley. So within the list of carry forward projects, there are a small number which are identified in orange. That said, that does not mean that they won't progress or they won't be completed, but from a delivery perspective and carry forward perspective, they are highlighted for that reason.
Thank you.
Councillor Stowe.
Wayne, I note that there's 2 more timber ridges being replaced in the budget. Is that to all of our timber ridges now?
Thanks, Councillor Stowe. I understand we're near completion.
Close.
We're very near completion of the Timber Bridges project.
Well, that's great. I seem to recall there was something like 20 of them before the fires, and to get down to the last couple now, that's a great effort.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? There is a recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stowe, seconded by Councillor Uri. Thank you very much. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Councillor Uri?
Thanks. I think it's always great to receive this report. There's always a lot in it. And I'm impressed. I can't remember when it was first reported to us, all those actions that were going to be put into place to ensure that we delivered our capital works project over time. Because and I think this has been a feature of this particular council, delivering this huge program. So I just congratulate the officers for putting those in place, because I think we seem to be successfully rolling on with the delivery, even though there are a lot of the projects have to be changed to multi-year projects. I think that in the end, and I'd perhaps like to eventually hear a comment from officers about how successful they think this has been, but it seems to me that it's been an advantage to push them out and to extend this period of, high activity in infrastructure build. It's great for the community. I think it'll be a real story to be told when we eventually come back to a normal size CapEx program. So very happy to receive the report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In that case, I will put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.2.2, which is CON 2024-1627, provision of arboriculture and general tree services, panel of suppliers. It's a confidential matter?
Thank you, Mayor.
Not at this stage.
The report is not a confidential matter. It has a confidential attachment.
Thank you.
That if the councillors want to discuss, they would need to move into confidential section of the meeting. Thank you.
Understood. Otherwise, we'll go to Mr. Wayne Richards, General Manager for Assets and Environment, to lead us into the discussion. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, before you is a report seeking acceptance of a scheduled tender of rates for the provision of arboriculture services. This schedule will replace an existing schedule of rates that is currently in place. It includes arboriculture works, but also professional advice. Council would be aware that there is an internal tree crew. However, there are some circumstances where it's beneficial to use contractors. That includes things like specialist work, so high lift towers, efficiency based on location, so for example outlying communities such as Mallacoota, response to storm events and particular events where there's significant works required, and also the opportunity to conduct independent reports. So there's a recommendation before you, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Greason.
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne, these panels, the panel's appointed for 12 months, isn't it, and then reviewed, is that correct? Or 3 years?
I believe with this one it's 3 years,
3
and then
years.
we have an option of extending it at the end of that 3 years.
Can you describe how council monitors the effectiveness of each of these contractors or subcontractors?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Greason. So I guess if you're talking with the engagement of contractors, so when there is a particular type of work, we will utilise the panel of contractors to work out the most efficient and effective mechanism. As far as a monitoring of quality of work, our tree services unit will conduct occasional inspections, but also work really closely with these contractors to understand what they're doing and how they're going about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillors, are there any other questions on our tree services contract tonight? No, we do have an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Greason. Thank you. Councillor Greason, we will get to that. Councillor Greason, could you please fill in the blanks? So I'm not sure you have that information to hand, do you? You do? Excellent.
So the recommended panel, so point 2, point 1 is as is, point 2.
I'll just get your microphone
That
turned on there,
helps.
Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Glad you're sitting next to me. Point 2, the recommended panel members are Bat Brothers Proprietary Limited, ATF Bat Family Trust Trading as Bat Brothers Vegetation Management for categories A, B, C, D and E. Second dot point, Druin Tree Services Proprietary Limited for categories A, B, C, D and F. Then NSpec Proprietary Limited for category F. Then Roots to Leaves Tree Services Proprietary Limited for categories A, B, C, D, E and F. Then TD Tree Services Proprietary Limited for categories A, C and D. Then Tonkin Rachel Trading as Uber Abor Girl for category F. I have to go back and check
I believe that will be Uber, Arbor, possibly.
Arbor, thank you. There's no R in there. Arbor Girl for category F. Thank you very much. Tree Limits Proprietary Limited for categories A, B, C, D, E and F. Thank you. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. And through the magic of television, could you please confirm that the information on the screen is correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Excellent. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Yes, I do. Councillor Reeves, thank you very much. Very good. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, this is clearly an efficient way to respond to need. Thank you.
Councillor Reeves? Would anybody else? Oh, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is also passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now move on to agenda item 5.2.3, which is Con 2024-1609, which is road safety upgrades, Marine Parade, Lakes Entrance. And I believe, Mr Richards, this also sits in your directorate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, before you was a report seeking to award a contract for road safety upgrades at Marine Parade Lakes Entrance. The project aims to achieve traffic calming, improved safety, improved pedestrian safety and improved on-road parking safety. Council obtained $1.2 million in Commonwealth funding for this project with an additional $900,000 council contribution. The contract relates specifically to works within the road reserve, noting the broader concept plan for Marine Parade includes works to the foreshore as well as roads and parking, which will form stage 2. Officers are actively advocating for funding for this second stage. So there's a recommendation before you and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions of officers on this report? Councillor Stowe.
I mean, during peak times in Lakes Entrance, I note that boats of necessity park along that road on the nature strip. Is that going to continue, or will they not be able to do that? And if they won't be able to do that, do we have a plan B for them?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stowe. So there is a concept plan that's provided with the report. The intent is for there to still be sufficient boat parking in the Marine Parade area. This will formalise that parking, which means that the second stage of this project would lead to formalised boat parking, which may lead to additional or changes in how those boats are parked. But the intent is to ensure that there's sufficient boat parking along Marine Parade.
Thank you, Mr Richards. Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Richards, could you please, for the benefit of anybody who might be listening or watching, could you please comment on the important role of the community reference group in this project, and also how they're being consulted with regards to the contract, the letting of this contract, and are they happy with this step in progress?
Thank you, Councillor Uri. So I guess as with all our major capital projects and a lot of other capital projects, is a project reference group is established with interested and key stakeholders in the particular project. There are generally regular meetings where information is provided right through, I guess, from concept stage through to letting of a contract and beyond. Their views are taken into account with design, with components of the project. So there has been a project reference group with this project. There has been regular communication with them, and understanding is that the project reference group is happy with the design. Thank you.
Terrific. And they will continue their work as a reference group through the stage 2 part of the project. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Uri. The likelihood is that there will be a project reference group, whether that is the same stakeholders or contributors. I guess it's not yet decided, but it is a probability.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Richards.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, are there any further questions? There is a recommendation. Councillor Buckley, would you like to move the motion or do you have a question?
Look, I just have a question. I'm looking at the maps and I just want to ask the question because there's been a considerable investment in the Lakes Entrance township as a whole, and and I'm just wanting assurance that what is being done in this capital works part of this program is not replicating anything that's been done before or recently done, that this is all being put into what needs to be done. So it's not it's not something that is redesigning something that is not that old, if you understand what I mean.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley. And I guess the answer to that question is that the intent of this project, as initially mentioned, is to resolve some road safety issues and some road parking issues and pedestrian issues. So, it is not recreating recent works that have been conducted there. It's there's specific works to achieve that, as mentioned, traffic calming measures, etc. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Snow?
Well, can I just ask one more question? The hire boat people, have they been consulted and are they on side with the project?
Thanks for the question. I would need to take that on notice unless Fiona has a...
I can perhaps, given my past history with this area, add to that if that's okay,
Please do.
Mayor. So yes, they have been consulted. They were looking for some additional works which were not able to be funded in this project because the grant funding was specifically for roadworks. So the grant came through a Commonwealth grant that couldn't undertake the works. They were looking for some removal and of reconstruction of some of their book ticketing offices. So they've been consulted. We're really clear about what their requirements are and what their desires are. And if and when we can find funding for that, we will certainly pursue that. Just as we did with the car parking, Councillor Stowe, you asked the question about additional boat parking. Again, that can't be funded because this funding couldn't be used for off-road parking. So we have undertaken a design project with Better Boating Victoria and are seeking funding for that project through other sources. So when through the consultation that we've undertaken with the reference groups and more broadly, where we've identified issues that are beyond the scope of this particular grant funding, which came from a very specific area within the Commonwealth and could only be used for on-road works. We've still undertaken the design work and we'll be looking for other funding sources for that into the future.
So will the hire boat businesses be able to continue their business when this project is complete?
Yes, they will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillors, are there any further questions of officers on this item? No, there is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Greeson, thank you. And a seconder, please.
Happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Greeson, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think it's been explained very well. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll just revise that and ask you to
Better populate that.
please fill in the blanks.
Okay, so thank you, Mayor. So point 2 is where the blanks are, and that council accepts the tender submitted by Cranes Asphalting and Bitumen Sealing Proprietary Limited for Con 2024-1609- Road Safety Upgrades Marine Parade Lakes Entrance for the revised tendered lump sum price of $1,664,679.25 without GST. And I think that's it. Blah, 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 blah.
And
yes,
can
correct.
you just
Thank
confirm that information on the screen is correct?
It is correct. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Reeves, you have seconded what's on the screen there. You
That's
can
what's on the
confirm
screen.
that is what's on the screen. That is correct. Excellent. Do you like to speak to the motion? Councillor
No, thank you.
Reeves?
No.
Is the motion opposed? No. Council, would anybody else like to speak to the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe that is carried unanimously, CEO. Thank you, councillors. Which moves us well down the agenda to item number 6, which is urgent business. CEO, do we have any urgent business for this evening?
I don't believe we do, Mayor.
Which moves us to confidential business. Do we have any confidential business to discuss this evening?
No, we don't. Not this evening, Mayor.
We don't, in which case that brings us to the end of this evening's meeting. Thank you very much, councillors and officers, for your participation. Members from Rotary, supportive parents, for your attendance. Anybody who enjoyed our meeting online, everybody present, good evening and have a safe travel home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening.